I was sitting at my desk reading through some old papers when one of them caught my eye. It was titled something like, "Why Men Prefer Blondes," and I thought to myself, oh, well, here goes another useless study. But then I started reading it, and it wasn't terrible. And there was something so interesting about it that I suddenly felt really stupid for having judged it so quickly. You see, every day we judge things and people based on what we think we know about human nature. People don't change. Everyone wants to be famous and rich. After a breakup, men move on faster than women. Well, it turns out that most of these beliefs aren't actually true. And this is a problem because while they might seem harmless, they can lead to serious misunderstandings, bad decisions, and missed opportunities. So today I want to do something different. I want to go over 5 of the most common myths about human behavior that we all believe but probably shouldn't. Okay, now back to the video. The first myth is that we're all rational decision makers. Humans evolved from hunter-gatherers, so we all have brains that are basically still stuck in the Stone Age. And like our primitive ancestors, we mostly rely on intuition rather than logic to get us through life. Unfortunately, there is a problem with this way of thinking. You see, our brain doesn't really work like a computer. It's not cold and calculating, just turning inputs into outputs, but instead it's much more like a messy house. There's stuff everywhere, and the only place to put new stuff is on top of the mess. So when you walk in, you can't see anything. Well, that's what happens to our thoughts too. We can't hold much information in our head at once, so we use mental shortcuts called heuristics to help us deal with everyday life. Like imagine you're at a buffet and you see a plate of chicken wings. If the pile looks small, you might think there's not much food left, even if it's early in the lunch rush. And the same thing happens with our thoughts. In order to make sense of the world, we fill in the blanks with educated guesses, and those guesses can be wrong. When we encounter new information, we try to fit it into an existing belief system. But sometimes the data doesn't match up. For example, studies show that even though men are statistically more likely to cheat in relationships, most people assume it's women who are more likely to cheat. Why? Because it fits our preconceived notions about female nature. But there's more. We also tend to believe information that confirms our existing opinions and ignore everything else. This is called confirmation bias, and it can lead us to make irrational decisions. For example, you might avoid reading articles that challenge your political views, which could cause you to miss out on important information that could affect your vote. This is why it's so important to be aware of cognitive biases and to question our own assumptions about the world. Otherwise, we could end up making decisions that aren't in our best interest. And speaking of assumptions, the second myth is that first impressions are always accurate. When we meet someone new, we usually form an opinion of them in just a few minutes. We take in their appearance, their body language, the way they speak, and we use all of that information to form a judgment about them. But it turns out that first impressions can be deceiving. For example, we tend to judge people by their appearance. We might think that someone who dresses well is more successful or someone who wears glasses is smart. But these are just stereotypes and they're not always true. When we meet someone new, we also tend to trust them unless we have a reason not to. But this can also lead us astray. We might trust someone who seems friendly and trustworthy, but they could be hiding something. Research shows that we tend to make snap judgments about others without realizing it. We call this the halo effect. And it can happen in a variety of situations, like when we meet someone new, when we watch a movie or TV show, or when we read a book. We tend to let our first impression of one aspect of a person or thing color our opinion of everything else about them. For example, if we meet someone who's wearing a suit and looks successful, we might assume that they're also intelligent, trustworthy, and funny. But just because someone looks successful doesn't mean they're smart or trustworthy. And just because someone looks funny doesn't mean they're intelligent. Of course, first impressions can give us some useful information about others, like if they're polite, respectful, and friendly. But it's important to remember that first impressions can be deceiving. We should avoid making snap judgments and instead get to know someone before forming an opinion of them. Now, the third myth is that we're all driven by self-interest. Humans are often portrayed as selfish creatures who will do whatever it takes to get ahead, no matter who they step on along the way. While there are certainly some people who behave this way, research suggests that it's not human nature. In fact, studies show that most people are capable of altruism, helping others at their own expense. We cooperate with strangers, donate to charity, and stand up for people who are being treated unfairly, even if there's nothing in it for us. But why would we do this? Well, it turns out that we're all social creatures and we depend on others to survive. We need other people to help us when we're in trouble, to listen to us when we're upset, and to offer us support when we're going through a hard time. And we know that other people need our help, too. That's why we feel empathy and compassion for those in need. We don't just think about ourselves. We also care about the feelings of others and we want to make the world a better place. Now, of course, there are times when we need to look out for ourselves. But it's important to remember that we're not just selfish animals who do whatever it takes to get ahead. We are also social creatures who care about others and want to make a positive impact on the world. The fourth myth is that we're all aware of our own biases. We like to think of ourselves as rational, unbiased beings who can see both sides of every issue. But the truth is that we all have biases and we're often unaware of them. In fact, research suggests that we're actually more aware of the biases of others than our own. We tend to think of ourselves as being right and just, and we often assume that other people are biased against us. For example, we might think that everyone else is a bad driver except for us. Or we might think that everyone else is selfish and greedy except for us. But the truth is that we all have biases and we're often not even aware of them. This is called blind spot bias, and it can be dangerous. Why? Because it keeps us from recognizing our own limitations and understanding the perspectives of others. It also makes it difficult to work in teams and can lead to conflict. The good news is that there are ways to overcome blind spot bias. One way is to be aware of our own biases and how they might be affecting our thinking. Another way is to seek out input from others, especially those who have different perspectives than us. By taking these steps, we can start to overcome our biases and become more rational, objective thinkers. The fifth and final myth is that there are universal human truths. We like to think that there are certain things that all humans have in common, like all humans are selfish or all humans are rational. But the truth is that we are all unique and our behavior is shaped by a variety of factors, including our genetics, our environment, our culture, and our personal experiences. For example, we might think that all humans are selfish, but there are plenty of people who are willing to put the needs of others before their own. And we might think that all humans are rational, but there are plenty of people who make decisions based on emotion rather than logic. Now, this doesn't mean that there are no universal human truths. We do share some common traits and behaviors. But it does mean that we should be careful about making generalizations about human nature. Instead, we should focus on understanding the individual and the unique set of circumstances that have shaped their behavior. In conclusion, these 5 myths are just the tip of the iceberg. There are many other beliefs about human behavior that we all hold that are not actually true. But by being aware of these myths and the research that has debunked them, we can start to think more critically about the world and the people around us. This is just the beginning. I highly encourage you to continue researching and learning about human psychology. Who knows? You might just surprise yourself with what you discover. That's it for me. Thank you so much for watching and don't forget to subscribe for more great content. And now I want to hear from you. What are some of the other myths about human behavior that you've come across? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks again for watching and see you soon.